Have you ever been judged just because you were too good at something? Not because you cheated, not because you cut corners, but simply because you were better than others, and that made someone feel uncomfortable. I was a seventh grader. Nothing special except for one thing: my handwriting. It was so neat that one day my teacher told me to make it worse, to match your classmates. When I refused, things spiraled beyond anything I could imagine. Punishment, accusations, smears, and eventually the entire school turned against me. But what my teacher didn't know was that everything was caught on camera. And when the story hit TikTok, an entire system was forced to confront a truth they had long tried to bury. This is a true story about a student who just wanted to write beautifully and a teacher who simply couldn't accept that. Chapter 1. My handwriting was too neat. So they accused me of cheating. Psych. I never thought my handwriting would put my entire academic future in jeopardy. But everything spiraled from one single detail: my handwriting was too neat for someone of my social class. I went to an ordinary public school. My family was poor. My mom worked as a nail tech, and my dad did night shifts in a warehouse. We lived in a cramped apartment with nothing remarkable about us except for the fact that I was the kind of student who liked to quietly do her work well. And one thing I was proud of was my handwriting. It wasn't fancy calligraphy, but it was something I'd trained for since I was 7 during a boring summer when my sister bought me some tracing books. I practiced every stroke, day after day, until now every line I write looks clean and precise as if it were printed. But then the essay on the American Civil War ruined everything. My history teacher, Ms. Thompson, called me in after class. She held my paper like it was a piece of used toilet paper. "Sarah," she said, voice sour like lemon left out overnight, "this is not your handwriting." I froze. "Excuse me, yes it is. I wrote that." She looked at me with barely concealed disdain. "Students from backgrounds like yours don't have time to practice handwriting like this. Clearly, your parents wrote it for you." I swear the only words in my head at that moment were, "What the hell?" I tried to explain. That my sister taught me to write when I was little. That I used to get teased for practicing handwriting while other kids played video games. That I'd written this way for over 10 years, but she didn't care. "I'm giving you a 0 for handwriting fraud." She declared like she'd just handed down a death sentence for my essay. I've been teaching for 25 years, and I know when a student is lying. I wanted to scream in her face. I've been poor for 17 years, and I know when someone's looking down on me. But I stayed quiet. I knew a head-on fight wouldn't help me here, so I came up with a plan. For the next essay, this one about the US Constitution, I deliberately wrote with my left hand. My handwriting looked like chicken scratch, all messy and crooked with crossed-out words everywhere. My eyes ached from trying to look incompetent, but I figured it was better to look messy than be accused of forgery again. A week later, she returned the paper. C. And this time, along with the grade, she gave me the most infuriating comment: "You deliberately made your handwriting worse to throw me off." That's also a form of cheating. I was stunned. When my handwriting is neat, it's fake. When it's messy, I'm manipulating. No matter what I did, she found a reason to label me dishonest. From then on, I was under a microscope. In class, I felt her eyes constantly on me. Every time I wrote something, she would stand nearby, glaring like I was transcribing national defense secrets. And then the rumors started spreading. Even some of my friends started being targeted. Emma, who's amazing at drawing, got interrogated for her too artistic handwriting. Tommy, whose dad designs typefaces, was also pulled aside. Anyone with neat penmanship or well-formed letters became a suspect. Ms. Thompson didn't back down. She announced a new policy. Any student whose handwriting was suspect had to complete their essays in her classroom during lunch under direct supervision. Of course, I was at the top of that list. From then on, every day I had to sit in her room while everyone else ate lunch in the cafeteria. She sat so close I could smell the boiled vegetables from her own lunch every time she breathed. Occasionally she'd sigh and say things like, Public school kids shouldn't have handwriting like this. It's just not realistic. I bit my lip, not out of anger, but because if I said what I really thought I'd be expelled before graduation. But over time, I started to understand this wasn't just about handwriting. This was about prejudice, about a teacher who believed that poverty equals incompetence, that someone like me couldn't possibly excel unless I was cheating. And I swore even if I had to write in blood, I would not let her decide my worth. Chapter 2. When a teacher tries to frame you at all costs. After 3 weeks of writing essays during lunch like some prisoner on special surveillance, I started to realize this wasn't about grades anymore. This was a war. And Ms. Thompson was playing a game called Blame by Belief. I remember that midterm exam day perfectly. 2 full hours of handwriting, no notes, no bathroom breaks, no phones, just me, 3 blue books, and a black ink pen. I wrote like a mad woman, pushed myself to the brink. My hand hurt so bad that every last word felt carved into my tendons. I wrote about the Industrial Revolution, about horrific working conditions, about how technology reshaped society, all from memory. Not a single line copied, not a shred of plagiarism. I did everything right. And yet I got the test back with a massive red F, splashed across the front like blood. On the very first page in bold, "See me after class. Mandatory." When I confronted her, my hands were shaking with rage. You were there. 2 straight hours. You watched me write the entire thing? Why the F she didn't respond right away. Instead, she pulled out her phone, opened some teacher group chat, then pointed to a screenshot of a forum post. This is a tip from a teaching forum. Some students memorize essays written by their parents and then recite them word for word during the test. So I'm still suspicious. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So now it didn't matter if there was proof logic or fairness. All she needed was an online theory and a condescending glance from someone in power. I practically screamed, "Are you seriously telling me I memorized 3 full pages every period, every comma while you watched, and that's still considered cheating?" She remained calm. This isn't the first time I've seen something like this. Poor students trying to appear gifted often find ways to deceive. I froze. That phrase, "poor students," didn't fall from her mouth as a description. It was a conviction. That night, I sat on my bedroom floor and pulled out a whole box of old stuff. Journals from 8th grade, handwritten birthday letters to my best friend, thank you notes to past teachers. All in my handwriting. Same style, same strokes, same long looping tails on every Y like vines curling on a wall. I laid them out on the table one by one and stared at them. 10 years of dedication. Now looking like evidence in a trial. No one cared to judge fairly. The next morning I went to school. No words, no greetings, just one resolution: I won't stay silent anymore. I brought every single sheet to Ms. Thompson's office. She looked up as I walked in, raising her eyebrows like she expected me to beg. I placed the entire stack on her desk. Go ahead, read them, every page, dated, in my handwriting, all me. She glanced at them, then shrugged coldly. These could easily be forged. I know your type. I let out a dry laugh. My type. The kind that can't afford tutoring, but spends summers practicing penmanship. She didn't answer. The next day I brought out a weapon of mass destruction. My mom. If you're Latina, you'll understand nothing. Shakes an authority figure like a mother, storming into school with bloodshot eyes and a stack of documents in hand. My mom spoke slowly, but with a chill that could freeze the entire room. I can't even write my own name properly, she said, pulling out a handwriting sample that looked like someone tried writing with their foot. I work 10 hours a day. I've never written an essay for my daughter. The only things I write are bills and overtime requests. Ms. Thompson began to stutter, but my mom wasn't done. If you still doubt her, have her write something right here. You pick the topic. You supervise her. Ms. Thompson looked at me, then smirked. like she had a clever idea. All right, write about the Carlist Wars in Spain. I nearly laughed. She thought choosing an obscure topic would expose me, but I was the nerd who wrote a 2,000-word paper on Carlism back in ninth grade. I grabbed a pen and started writing. For 30 minutes, the room was tense with silence. Ms. Thompson sat and watched while my mom stood nearby, arms crossed like a military officer. When I finished, she picked up the paper and compared every stroke to the previous essays. Her face went from red to purple to pale as half-melted candle wax. Looks like a match, she mumbled, but these days you can never be too careful. Academic integrity is extremely important. I nodded. Thanks for the reminder. I feel the same, and I'll do everything I can to uphold it. She thought the battle was over, but she had no idea I had documented this entire journey. And that night, I posted a TikTok video that ensured the name Misty Thompson would never again be associated with the word education. Chapter 3. The video that got my teacher banned from ever teaching again. That night, I sat at my desk, surrounded by stacks of old papers, pens, and a fire in my eyes. Not out of anger, but because I had made a decision. I was done playing by their rules. I recorded a simple TikTok video, no music, no filters, just my hand flipping through page after page of my writing from when I was 7 years old to birthday, thank you letters, journal entries, old assignments, and even that essay she gave an F. I captioned it, POV, when your teacher thinks you're too poor to have good handwriting. Within 30 minutes, the video had over 10,000 views. An hour later, it hit 50,000. By the time I went to bed, the comment section had exploded with hundreds of stories from students everywhere. My teacher did the same thing to me. I got marked down because this doesn't look like poor kid handwriting. OMG, this is the first time someone's finally saying it. The next morning, I walked into school without saying a word. But Ms. Thompson, she was glued to her phone, her face red like a tomato on the verge of boiling. She stared at me as I passed, then quickly looked down and kept texting. Her hands were trembling, her eyes panicked. By lunchtime, I opened my email and saw a subject line that sent chills down my spine. Please take down your TikTok video regarding cyberbullying allegations. From the principal. So that's the problem. Not that I was humiliated. Not that I was falsely accused. Not that I was treated like a fraud because of how I wrote. The problem was that I dared to speak up. After school, I walked to the parking lot. And who was standing there blocking my car? Ms. Thompson. Phone in hand, voice trembling like she was about to cry, she said, "You don't understand the consequences? You're ruining my reputation." I didn't say a word. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started live streaming. No threats, no insults, just a running camera. And in her panic, Ms. Thompson started blurting out everything. "You don't know what students are like these days. You all think you can get away with everything and just blame the teachers?" A group of students walked by. They stopped. Some of them pulled out their phones too. And right then my phone buzzed. A message from Emma. "My mom just saw your video. She's on the school board. She wants to meet you, ASAP." I glanced back at Ms. Thompson. "You might want to prep for that board meeting next week. Looks like you'll have a lot to explain." Her face turned white, lips pressed tight. That night, my video hit 200,000 views, and then another email arrived, this time from a supposed lawyer, an unverified Gmail address signed off as legal counsel for the teacher, demanding I take the video down and issue a public apology for defamation and career damage. I just laughed. Funny how someone who had no problem accusing students without evidence suddenly wanted to sue someone for telling the truth. The next morning, I went to school early to grab a notebook I'd left in class. The security office door was ajar. No one was inside. But through the gap, I saw Ms. Thompson, sitting at her computer. Clicking delete. Then again and again, she was sweating hands, trembling. On the screen, a list of security footage clips, especially from lunch periods. The very times she had forced me to write essays under direct supervision, she was deleting them all. And just as she clicked, confirm, delete. All I stepped in, she jumped, spun around. Her face looked like someone who'd just been caught red-handed. Neither of us said a word. I simply gave a slight nod. "Good morning, Ms. Thompson," and walked out. I didn't need to threaten her, because I knew she knew that I'd seen everything, and this time the world would see it too. Chapter 4: When the school tried to cover the truth, and I tore the mask off. After that day, I knew the battle was no longer just between me and Ms. Thompson. It had become something much bigger, a face-off between truth and a phony system that protects itself behind polite smiles and emails that start with, "Dear." That's when my mom started getting strange phone calls. Not from teachers, but from other parents. One said her daughter, a top student from a working-class family, had once been given an unfairly low grade by Ms. Thompson, with no explanation. Another said her son was forced to rewrite his essay 3 times because his handwriting looked like it was typed. All of them were hesitant, wary, as if speaking up might get their kids punished further. But then, someone stopped being afraid. Tommy, the classmate whose dad designs fonts, handed me a thick folder. His father had used professional software to analyze my handwriting samples from 2nd grade to now. Conclusion: Tommy said, "Your handwriting developed, naturally evolved with each grade level, and shows no signs of copying or forgery." I nearly cried, but it didn't stop there. A new message popped up on my phone from an unknown number. "I'm Ms. Thompson's teaching assistant. I want to talk, but I'm afraid I'll get fired." We met at a small cafe in town. Her name was Jennifer, a final year student in the education program. Her voice trembled as she told me that Ms. Thompson had a pattern. She had handled at least 3 other students in the past simply because their handwriting was too neat for their family background. Jennifer revealed that Ms. Thompson graded students partially based on home addresses and surnames. If your name sounded Hispanic, or you lived in a low-income neighborhood, your odds of getting a lower grade doubled. She showed me a photo, 2 essays nearly identical in content. The only difference was the handwriting. One got a B+, the other a D. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh bitterly. That night, my boyfriend, Jay, picked me up for a date. He knew everything, knew I was fighting, knew what I was up against, but the whole evening he barely said a word. His eyes looked uncomfortable. Finally, when I asked, he sighed. "Maybe you should stop. Not everyone wants to hear this. She's old anyway. She'll retire soon." I looked at him, and it felt like someone had turned the volume of my heart down to mute. I asked him, "So, whose side are you on?" He stayed silent, staring at the steering wheel. I got out of the car, didn't say a word, because in that moment I didn't need a driver. I needed a partner, and clearly Jay wasn't it. The next day I pulled up ratemyteacher.com, that anonymous site where students leave teacher reviews. I searched for Ms. Thompson. Expanded the results across 15 years. What did I find? Every few years, there'd be a sudden spike in negative reviews, all circling around the same complaints. Unfair grading. Accused me because of my handwriting. Lost my scholarship because of her. One former school even had a post accusing her of costing a student their full ride scholarship just because she gave them a suspiciously low grade. I couldn't believe it. For years she had been doing this and no one stopped her, but this time was different. This time she messed with the wrong person. Because I'm not that 7-year-old girl anymore hunched over a workbook tracing letters with an HB pencil. I'm the girl who knows how to use the internet, who knows how to gather receipts, and who knows that when you stand up, you never stand alone. Chapter 5: When the school tried to bury the truth, but I dug the grave backward. I used to believe that if I had enough proof, the adults would listen. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Especially not the kind of adults who share wine together at Saturday wine nights at the end of every month. That Monday morning, I brought every document I had. Handwritten letters, handwriting, analysis testimony from the TA, even the reviews from Rate My Teacher to the assistant principal's office. I waited for over an hour. Finally, Ms. Chen, the assistant principal, poked her head out wearing a tired smile. "Oh, Sarah, we need to talk about your attitude." I sat down, presented everything clearly. Logical, documented, with visuals, dates, names. She listened. Then she picked up her phone and started scrolling through photos. "Ms. Thompson is a friend of mine," she said gently, like wind brushing past a hedge. "We have little weekend gatherings. She's passionate, but a bit traditional. Maybe this is just a personality clash." A personality clash, excuse me, but when a teacher deliberately destroys a poor student's shot at a scholarship because their handwriting doesn't look poor enough, that's not a quirk. That's systemic discrimination. The assistant principal just shrugged like I'd complained about not getting enough butter on my toast. That night, I shifted from defense to attack. I created an anonymous account and joined a Facebook group called Educators Against AI, a group Ms. Thompson had once proudly mentioned she was part of. Within 3 hours, I was in. And oh my God, it was a goldmine. I found dozens of Ms. Thompson's old posts from when she worked at her previous school. They said things like, "Rich kids think they can buy good grades. You can tell what job a student's parents have just by looking at their handwriting. Perfect penmanship, instant red flag." Her own words practically convicted her in the Court of Educational Justice. At the same time, a private group chat from the English department leaked. Screenshots flooded the internal network. Teachers discussing her grading style. Mr. Williams wrote bluntly, "Good essay with bad handwriting gets a B. Weak essay with neat handwriting gets an A." She's clearly grading by penmanship. Ms. Garcia added, "I've started telling my students to write messier if they want to pass history." That's when I knew I wasn't alone. I began compiling names of students who'd been affected scholarship candidates. Kids with parents who worked blue-collar jobs. Those who received free lunch assistance. They all had one thing in common. They couldn't afford to fail, but they had been forced to. Then Jennifer, the TA, messaged me, "I have a file you need to see." It contained photos of students' essays before and after being graded by Ms. Thompson. One essay, thoughtful, clean handwriting, scored low. Another, shallow content, messy handwriting, scored higher. And then her handwritten comment, "Too perfect, Reeker suspicious." I got chills reading that, not out of fear, but because I knew we were holding the rope tied to Miss Thompson's entire career. And every truth we revealed loosened another knot. 3 more students messaged me in secret. One said they were forced to rewrite an essay because it didn't look like it came from a black student. Another lost extra credit points because their name sounded too rich. I'm not making this up. There really was a teacher out there judging students' honesty by their names and handwriting. Soon after, Ms. Thompson tried to ban phones in class, but the other teachers refused. They knew she was trying to hide something. One English teacher quietly told me, "We can't pretend anymore." That afternoon, I was standing in line at the cafeteria when one of the lunch ladies pulled me aside. She whispered, "I heard Ms. Thompson crying in the bathroom today. She said you poor kids are ungrateful, that you don't understand the value of real education." I stood there silent, because in that moment, I didn't feel angry. I felt pity. Pity for someone who thought her own prejudice was some sort of moral compass. Pity for a system that had let her teach for 20 years. Pity for all the students who once believed they weren't good enough, when really all they lacked was a fair shot. Chapter 6. The teacher tried to smear me in front of the whole school, and I made her dig her own grave. I once thought Ms. Thompson would retreat in silence. But I underestimated one thing, how stubborn people can be when they refuse to believe they're wrong. And I realized that on a Sunday night, when I received an email from the school titled "Announcement Sarah" to speak at incoming student orientation. Wait. But I opened the email, and just as I suspected, Ms. Thompson, backed by the administration, had selected me as the model of academic integrity, chosen to speak in front of the entire freshman class at orientation. Yes, you heard that right. She was trying to turn me, the very person who had just exposed her favoritism class, bias and handwriting discrimination, into a morality showpiece for hundreds of students, parents, and teachers. A sneaky way of saying she blew it out of proportion, but look, she's speaking now. So let's move on. Classic maneuver. So bureaucratic. So Thompson. But by now I had learned how to play chess, and this time I had the queen in play. That night I dug deeper into her past posts from her former school. That's where I found a case named Marcus, a student she accused of plagiarism simply because his handwriting was too clean and stylized. Marcus had to transfer schools mid-year, and his mother had written a blog post about the experience, but no one paid attention. I reached out to Marcus's family. Less than an hour later, his father responded. He was a technology consultant, and when he found out I was fighting Ms. Thompson, he didn't hesitate. Send over the handwriting samples, he said. I'll run the analysis. Within 24 hours, we had a full report. Students with neat handwriting from working class or low-income families consistently received lower grades than the average. Meanwhile, students from wealthy families with handwriting that looked like chicken scratch still passed. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was quantitative data. A punch to the face of her so-called 25 years of teaching intuition. But that wasn't the knockout blow. A few days later, I got called to the library for suspicious computer activity. What the hell, I showed up. And the librarian, Ms. Park, pulled me aside and whispered, Ms. Thompson asked us to monitor you. She wants to know if you're using school computers to cheat. I scoffed. Ms. Park just shook her head. I refused, she said, and I told the other staff, we can't let this go on any longer. It was a small shockwave, but it spread fast. I started compiling everything: photos, writings, analysis, texts, emails, statements. I named the file Thompson, a system of bias and grade manipulation. When I met with the principal that Wednesday morning and handed it over, he just sighed and said, no, look into this seriously. But you should focus on your studies. This is starting to affect your well-being. I wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because adults always tell you to calm down even when they are the reason you can't study in peace. I left his office and walked straight into the bathroom. There I ran into 3 other students, all of them victims of Ms. Thompson's teaching. Maria, once valedictorian, lost the title because her essay was too polished to be hers. David's scholarship revoked after a mysterious F. Aisha dropped AP history just to protect her mental health. We looked at each other. No words needed. We created a group chat, Ink Warriors, the beautiful handwriters, on trial. That afternoon, I spent 3 hours in the library digging through 10 years of school yearbooks. And you know what I found? Every single year, since Ms. Thompson started teaching, the dropout rate from AP history among students of color or working class backgrounds was abnormally high. And among those who stuck with it, very few ever earned an A. The pattern was clear. This wasn't an innocent teacher with a bias she didn't notice. This was a person deliberately using her authority to punish poor students for daring to be smart, to stand out, to dream bigger than their place. Thursday morning, I got an anonymous message from a former teacher at Ms. Thompson's old school. I witnessed similar things, but I stayed silent. If you want, I have a list of students she affected. I wrote back with just one line: I need it. The storm was coming, and this time I was the eye of it. Chapter 7. The final hearing. When the teacher lost everything and we took justice back. The week leading up to the school board hearing felt like the soundtrack to a war film, tense, suspenseful, and everyone preparing for a battle no one was certain they'd win. My mom had turned into a full-blown commander-in-chief. She started a parents-only group chat, personally adding each contact families whose children had been affected by Ms. Thompson, or who had quietly heard their kids complain, but never dared to speak up. Within just 3 days, the group exploded. Over 30 families joined. We agreed on one thing: everyone would attend the meeting. No one would go in alone. No one would be pulled aside for a private discussion. If Ms. Thompson had something to say, she would say it, in front of all of us. But it didn't stop there. The Monday before the hearing, I discovered that the college recommendation letter Mr. Rodriguez had written for me was missing from the student counseling portal. I asked the admin. She stammered, "Probably a system glitch." No idea how it disappeared. I didn't blame her, just felt tired. Because I knew when you poke the system strikes back. That afternoon, I went to Mr. Rodriguez's office. He sat there, same wrinkled dress shirt, same warm smile. I told him what happened. He sighed, opened a drawer, and pulled out a printed copy. "I figured this might happen," he said. "And if you need someone to vouch for you at the hearing, I'll be there. You're one of the most honest students I've ever taught." I nearly cried, but I wasn't allowed to cry yet, because that night I received a very special email from Mrs. Thompson. Subject line, "An opportunity for a fresh start." In it, she offered, if I took down the TikTok video, issued a public apology, and stopped sharing any more information, she'd restore my grades, write me a new recommendation letter, and ensure there were no more conflicts, a cheap settlement, a manipulative trade, and possibly a sign of desperation. I took a screenshot, added it to the evidence file. The next day, I met with other teachers. A math teacher so cold and distant I used to think he was a robot pulled me aside in the hallway and said, "You're doing the right thing. If you need another recommendation letter, just ask." A science teacher told me I always thought something was off. Why were the smartest students failing only in history? Understand. Support was building. Even teachers who had once stayed silent started comparing grades, and they saw it too. Students excelling in every subject except hers. That Wednesday afternoon, I got a message from the school's IT assistant. "You need to know this." They had found login records of Ms. Thompson accessing the school's camera system, specifically the lunch period videos where she'd forced me to write under supervision. But what she didn't know was the system had automatic backups on a secondary server. The footage she thought she had deleted still existed, and it was clearer than ever. I barely slept the night before the hearing. Not from fear, but because it finally felt like it was time to lay the cards on the table. Tuesday morning. Gray skies, drizzle in the air. I wore a plain white shirt my mom had ironed the night before. Nothing flashy, just a regular student, coming to speak the truth. When I arrived, the school parking lot was almost full. Parents clustered in quiet groups. Students in rain jackets holding folders, their eyes serious. Some teachers entered the auditorium silently, giving me slight nods. The school board convened a special session. The chair opened with, "We're here today to address a serious matter with an unprecedented volume of evidence." I wasn't the first to speak. The parents went first. They read rejection letters from colleges, displayed scans of rescinded scholarships. One mother cried as she recalled her child smashing a mirror in the bathroom because they believed they were too stupid for scholarships. Then came the students. Maria, the former valedictorian, spoke with a trembling voice. I stopped believing in myself. Because of one D I could never explain. David recounted giving up his dream college after mysteriously failing history. Aisha, who dropped the AP course, said through tears, "I didn't leave because it was hard. I left because I knew there was no way to win against her." Then the teachers spoke, with statistics, charts, data, lists of affected students, grade comparisons. The truth laid bare. Students with elite-sounding names, high grades. Students with neat handwriting from poor neighborhoods, low grades. Students of color, called in more often for questioning. Then it was my turn. I walked up with a file in my hand. I didn't give a speech. I just read her own words, her Facebook group posts, her comments on students' essays, the email offering a deal, screenshots of her deleting camera footage, evidence, one page at a time. No spin, no exaggeration. The room went silent. Ms. Thompson sat in the front row, face pale, hands trembling. Beside a man introduced as her legal counsel, he stood up and objected, called it a defamation campaign led by angry students, claimed it was a personal misunderstanding blown up by social media. But then came the questions. A board member asked, "Why were the security videos deleted under your login?" Another followed. "Why are grades clearly tied to names and handwriting?" Not content, Ms. Thompson fumbled. Her voice faltered, her sentences unraveled. She was no longer confident. After a brief, closed-door discussion, the board returned. The chair stood and declared, "Given the evidence presented, we are placing Ms. Misty Thompson on immediate suspension, pending a full investigation." No one clapped. Just the sound of deep exhales, relief, not celebration. Because this wasn't a victory to cheer. It was the start of a reckoning. Chapter 8. After the mask fell, the whole system had to change. Ms. Thompson left the auditorium like a ghost. No words, no eye contact, no more excuses. Just a familiar figure suddenly lost in the very school she once ruled like an uncrowned queen. I watched her disappear down the far hallway with her worn crossbody bag and an empty stare. And in that moment, I didn't feel triumphant. I only thought, this should have ended a long time ago, but she wasn't the only problem. The system that allowed someone like Ms. Thompson to teach for over 20 years. Despite complaints, negative reviews, and hurt students, that was what needed to be uprooted. And this time, the school couldn't look away anymore. The very next day, the school sent an email to all parents and students announcing an independent committee would re-examine every grade Ms. Thompson had given over the past 2 years. All affected students would have the right to request academic review and potentially have their GPA officially adjusted. Blind grading would be implemented in all subjective courses. And a brand new role was created, school equity officer, to oversee grading fairness, handle student complaints, and monitor discriminatory behavior. For the first time, this felt like more than just a win. It felt like the crack in a broken system finally splitting open. Formerly silent teachers now started stepping up. They rechecked old assignments, searched for patterns of inconsistent grading. One teacher told me, "I remember seeing good papers get bad marks, but I never imagined it was because of neat handwriting." I stayed quiet. "I'm sorry." I nodded. I didn't need apologies or tears. I just needed them to stop pretending not to see. Jennifer, the TA who helped me, applied for a full teaching credential. She told me that because of this, she realized she wanted to protect students, not judge them through bias. As for me, I spent most of my time helping others, writing appeals, organizing documents, collecting teacher statements. The students who'd had their futures sabotaged by Ms. Thompson now had a chance to fix their records before college applications. One girl who had lost her scholarship offer because of a bogus C+ was regraded to an A, and the college re-offered her admission. I received a new letter from the National Honor Society. Previously, I'd been denied because Ms. Thompson had marked me as lacking academic integrity. Now they'd re-evaluated based on recommendations from Mr. Rodriguez and others. In the letter, they wrote, "We were wrong, and you proved it." Then, the email I never expected came in. My dream university sent a new offer, a full acceptance, along with a handwritten note from the director of admissions. "We don't just need good students. We need students who fight for justice in halls that pretend to be silent." When I finished reading, my eyes stung, but I didn't cry, because I had saved my tears for the day I won, not the days I was crushed. That weekend, our Ink Warriors group, now over 60 members strong, held a gathering at the local park. No signs, no chants. Just food, drinks, and stories that had once been whispered in shame, now spoken out loud. One mother hugged me and said, "Thank you. Because of you, my daughter believes in college again." I smiled, but in my heart I thought I didn't do it alone. I just lit the match. And then, one final email from the District Education Board. It was short. "Teacher Misty Thompson has been permanently stripped of her teaching license. No transfer, no early retirement, no personal leave. Revoked." I forwarded the email to my mom. She replied with one word, "deserved," After everything, I didn't feel hatred. I didn't want Ms. Thompson in prison. I didn't want her name dragged across the headlines. I just wanted one thing, for her to never again have the power to ruin another child's future. And I made sure of it. Chapter 9. I graduated with the handwriting they tried to condemn and watched a whole system rewrite itself with justice. There's a moment I'll never forget. It was when I stepped onto the graduation stage holding my honor certificate, my eyes scanning the rows of students below, friends who had once been silenced by Ms. Thompson's red pen, friends who had been accused simply because their handwriting was too neat, or who once believed they were not good enough because they were born in the wrong zip code. And then the auditorium erupted in applause, not just for me, but for an entire generation of students who had just reclaimed their voice. At that ceremony, I was recognized for having overcome adversity and contributed to positive change in the academic community. At the graduation party, my mom brought out the most special thing, my old handwriting workbook from when I was 7. Worn out, curled corners, but every page still showed the strokes I carefully traced in our tiny kitchen using a pencil that grew shorter every day. Next to it sat a photo of me smiling. The smile Ms. Thompson once tried to extinguish with a handwritten F, but that F now stood for freedom. After Ms. Thompson's license was revoked, the district rolled out a wave of changes. Blind grading became mandatory across all schools. An anonymous reporting system was launched, allowing students to speak up without fear of retaliation. All subjective evaluations now required 2 independent graders to ensure fairness. And most notably, every student who had taken Ms. Thompson's class within the past 5 years was invited to have their academic records reviewed and college applications reassessed. I spent weeks helping dozens of classmates write appeal letters, gather documentation, and compare old versus new grades. We called it the restoration semester, where no one had to carry the consequences of one person's prejudice anymore. One student who had lost her scholarship due to a fabricated C+ had her grade changed to an AE, and the university reinstated her offer. As for me, I received a new letter from the National Honor Society. They had previously rejected me because Ms. Thompson marked me academically dishonest. Now they reassessed based on letters from Mr. Rodriguez and several other teachers. In the letter they wrote, "We were wrong, and you proved it." Then came another surprise, my dream university, the one I thought was only for other people's kids, sent me a new admission email. Attached was a handwritten note from the director of admissions. "We don't just seek intelligence. We seek courage, integrity, and impact. You are the embodiment of all 3. I sat alone that night and reread all the messages I had received from students across the country. A boy from Ohio. My teacher made me rewrite my essay because it looked too adult. After your video, I realized I wasn't crazy. A girl from Texas. Thank you, I talked to my parents and decided not to drop out after all. A parent. My child was a victim of the system. Thanks to you, they understand now they're not broken, the system was. And I realized I didn't win because I was special. I won because I refused to stay silent. As I packed my suitcase to leave for college, where I would major in sociology, a field I once thought was for people who talk about problems instead of solving them, I understood something clearly. Studying systems is how you save the kids who don't yet know they're worthy. I carefully wrapped my childhood handwriting notebook and tucked it between my college textbooks. Because it wasn't just a memory. It was evidence. Evidence that what was once too perfect to be real could become the very tool that broke down a wall of prejudice. My handwriting had once been labeled as suspicious, too elegant to be poor, too clean to be authentic, too neat to be mine. But now, that same handwriting had rewritten the history of an entire school. I don't know where Ms. Thompson is now. Maybe she's trying to move on, telling someone she was just a victim of ungrateful students. But I don't care. What matters to me is this. No student will ever again be judged by their penmanship, their name, or their neighborhood. Because we proved something. Fairness doesn't come from the person with the longest tenure in the room. It comes from the one with the courage to speak up when everyone else bows their head. And if you're listening to this story, whether you're a student, a parent, or someone who's ever been wrongly judged, please remember, beautiful handwriting isn't a crime. Success has no zip code, and your voice, when spoken at the right moment, can change an entire system. Even now, I still don't understand why some adults are afraid of a kid simply doing well. But I've learned one thing. Sometimes you don't need to scream to be heard. You just need to let the truth speak for itself. Thanks to one TikTok clip the world found out. And thanks to those who had the courage to speak up, from teaching assistants to parents to the forgotten students, we forced that system to change. And that teacher, maybe she'll return to teaching. Maybe not. But one thing is certain, she'll never forget this lesson. Never force a child to dim their light just because it makes an adult uncomfortable. If you've ever been told to blend in just to be accepted, know this, you are not alone. Thank you for listening to this story.